The Laboratory for Embodied Intelligences is an experiment in how we humans might consider intelligences in different creatures by using our bodies as tools for perception, together with scientific research and data about these creatures' behavior. We are excited about bringing artists, scientists, and community members together to learn from and dialogue with each other about their particular research on physical behaviors, sociality, communication, and intelligence at many scales and from a range of cultural angles. We feel that any attempt to consider non-human intelligence requires dialogue amongst a wide spectrum of perspectives. This started because I was an artist in residence at the SETI Institute, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, which is searching for intelligence. And so I was very curious, well, who is defining intelligence and how are you defining it? And I thought it very important to bring together a wide group of folks. And Flora dove in very early on so that we could have this bodily focus. And this is just a little image here. This is Penny Boston. She's the director of NASA's Astrobiology Institute, one of the many generous scientists who've collaborated with us along the way. I guess we've been at this for a couple of years. Yeah. And this is a performance that we did Memorial Day weekend in the cliffs over the beach in Santa Monica. So we created a performance that Flora and the dancers performed on the beach, coming up over the Pacific Coast Highway into the park, and then after Penny was there to answer questions from the audience, which included people who knew and just random folks who happened to walk by, which we were really interested in engaging. We wanted to be in a public setting like that. So why explore microbial behaviors in the first place? All earthly life forms evolve from microbes. So perceptions and communications in contemporary plants and animals, including us, are built upon a scaffolding of the perception, communication, and movement capacities given to us by microbes. So that's one reason why we might do this. Secondly, in the last 20, 30 years, there's been a lot of leaps in cognitive science and neuroscience, and George Lakoff and Mark Hansen summarized that nicely in Philosophy in the Flesh, where they say that the very structure of reason itself comes from the details of our embodiment. There's no separate mind. I'm sure everybody in the room knows that. But anyway, the same neural and cognitive mechanisms that allow us to perceive, to move around, those same mechanisms create our conceptual systems and mode of reason. The very same neural pathways that we use to move and identify pattern are those we use to intellectually think. So they're physically derived, embodied. If the structure of our reason is created by the same mechanisms as our perceptions and movements, and these mechanisms have evolved from microbial behaviors, perhaps looking more deeply at microbial behaviors may locate patterns of connectedness between human logics and those of many species we believe ourselves superior to. And then thinking cosmically, astrobiologists, many of whom we talked to, that was a big part of the pool of scientists we consulted with, agree that the most likely and prevalent life that we will find out in space will be microbial in nature. So if that's the case, why not look into their intelligence here on Earth, possible intelligence? So we might better anticipate who we'll be communicating with in the cosmos, and we might learn something about how to communicate with them. And then lastly, closer to home, in and on your body, and I'm sure many of you have been reading all these things about the microbiome and the prevalence of microbes and the necessity of them in our lives. We have actually 100, the number varies, 100, 150 times more microbial DNA in and on your body than human DNA. Many of these microbes are in contact with your second brain, the enteric system, the 100 million gut-located neurons that deeply impact your moods and your thinking by controlling the other brain in your head. So it's arguable to what degree we're running the show. You get that ratio of 150 to 1. So you dive in.
Okay, so this is a quote by Richard Dawkins. We had done a ton of research before we even started in the laboratory, which is mainly the dance studio. But we did so much reading and organized a think tank with a number of different scientists of various sort of focuses. And Richard Dawkins was one of the authors that we read, and there's this great quote: "If you push novelty of language and metaphor far enough, you can end up with a new way of seeing, which can in its own right make an original contribution to science." So we kind of thought that we might be onto something in terms of trying out some things that haven't been done before, and we may discover something really important along the way.
I just want to say, interestingly, I mean, many of the scientists, so I was like running the halls at SETI and NASA, getting to talk to these folks, and it was a little bit self-selecting, but I would say like 50% of them were really interested and actually thought that we also that we really might be able to contribute something to science, not just come up with some cool dance moves. So they understand, particularly those who work in astrobiology, microbiology, the degree to which anything's sensory capacity must come out of its sensory apparatus and its relationship to the environment, hence embodiment. So they were like, no, that sounds good.
So for the first section of our research, which we sort of just completed by a generous funding from the 18th Street Art Center in Santa Monica, we dove into the lab and we started just trying on different ways of embodying microbes in any way that we possibly can. The first thing that we started doing was thinking about the physical form of the microbe, and then trying to experience our bodies in a way that's a little more similar to that. And there's the microbes come in various shapes and forms and sizes, so we didn't attach to one single idea of form, but we really looked at like the physical makeup. So they have an outer capsule, and then in there, in going inward from that is a permeable membrane, and inwards from there, like the whole middle part is filled with cytoplasm, which is a gel-like matrix that can change in viscosity. So little bits for life functions can be moved around by changing the viscosity of that cytoplasm and sliding them from one place to another. And the spectrum of the viscosity is from something very liquid like water to something that's almost like glass right before it hardens. So there's this huge range of like really, really fluid to almost, almost hard. So what we did was we tried to think about our own bodies. Yeah. And yeah, go ahead and play that. So we sort of talked dancers through oops.
Oh, that's interesting. I'm on silent, but you're not.
Can we just turn the speakers off? Yeah. So we went through different exercises to try and physicalize this idea of being more liquid, because the human body is between 57 and 60% water, and microbes are 80. So one of the first things was thinking about the insides of our, our like permeable membrane of our skin as being like cytoplasm and taking on various viscosities, following movement through that, and being able to move things around. So thinking about our own form, we have our skin, we have bones, we have organs, there's blood, there's nerves. So we tried on moving like the intestines and like thinking about a pathway from the intestines up to our brain, where our brain is held, trying to liquefy that and slide the intestines all the way up there. We put the brain into the pelvis, so if you can think from like the center of your body, or a kneecap into the throat. And then we got into sensory organs, like moving the eyes into the palms of your hands or your inner elbows. We did ears to the sides of your belly button and tried to listen from there. What else did we do?
We had the tongue on the feet.
Oh, yeah.
But it sounds fanciful. But what's interesting, I mean, dancers are more attuned to this, but we also ran public workshops. So we ran one at the Hammer. We ran one with kids in Virginia Avenue Park. That was part of the grant wanted us, and we wanted to engage with the community. And we decided we want to show you video. We could have maybe just as well run a workshop in here. The mind is very suggestive, so we went through this process of sort of adding water. We talked people through adding water gel between their joints and adding water to their bodies. So you do this over 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and you really do start to feel more liquid and lighter. And then Flora or I would take turns like talk through okay, you might start out as a kind of a gel, or maybe then we'd get you almost a hard glass, but then you would literally picture this pathway. So you can start to sense things the same way like all these placebo tests have people losing their headaches because of a placebo. So it actually does function.
And also, it was disorienting from the human perspective too, especially when we layered. So moving the eyes to the hands, the tongue to the feet, and then maybe the ears to your belly. If you heard a sound, you would sort of be alerted by that through your belly button area, and just kind of keeping track or not being able to keep track of where all of your sensing is happening really kind of got you away from your normal experience of the human body, and you really tried to take in information in a totally different way.
Yeah, we would talk to the dancers along the way, and when we would do this sensing with that, particularly the eyes and the hands, because the hands are a lot like eyes, they're so sensitive. But people, one of the dancers was saying that it really got her confused and thinking about what seeing might really be, or how it might be different, So yeah, you would have these kind of sensory shifts. And so that leads, where do you want to
go ahead.
That leads sort of naturally to a very interesting, the relationship between sensing and moving is very close and nicely illustrated with microbes. They can move all different ways, but we're going to talk about this thing called twitching mechanism, which is pretty amazing, where they can, they open a pore in their membrane any place they want, and they stack up proteins. So they basically grow a long hair. Sometimes it's like you'll see, here I'll just play this. This is just on loop. It's very hard to video these guys. So this is one of the experts, and this was as long of a video as he could get of these guys doing this. But so what they're doing, they're stacking up those proteins, growing this hair, and then they stick it on something, and it's got adhesive at the end, and then they retract it, and when they retract it, that pulls the body there. And then you do another one, and you do it again, and that's a way to move. But they can do it anywhere on their body. So they can grow appendages anywhere, and they have this like 360-degree motility. So for dancers or anybody, that's pretty cool. But it's also, they use them to sense, they use them for sex, they're pretty much all purpose, like everything happens through this appendage. It's pretty cool. So this is a little video of, so you could probably safely keep the lights kind of low because it's going to be a lot of video. So they start out the dancers.
Oh yeah, so the exercise or the sort of directions were to start simply because it's easier for us to understand these appendages through our own, right? So we have these things that stick out of our bodies. So we began, first of all, by growing. So you think of a pore area and you try and grow that appendage, either your arm or your leg, from that pore area and reach as far as you possibly can and just almost see what you can sense from that. And then you're going to retract it in. And so then as it retracts, all the proteins re-enter the entire surface of the membrane. So it's sort of this extending and then reincorporating on the whole body. So that's basically what we're doing here. So we did hands, we did legs, and then we started doing this from places that you couldn't actually see. So you could grow one from the middle of your back or, anywhere. And you're reaching that as far as you can. You think about it maybe sticking to something. And then at that point, you could retract yourself towards the point where you stuck. So then we started moving through space. As opposed to just reaching, we started traveling.
So these are dancers performing twitch motility, as it's called in the microbial world. And so, Penny Boston came down at this point. This is from a performance we did in early June in this really great 300-foot long tunnel that runs under the 10, like in Santa Monica, not so well known. And anyway, she was really excited. She felt like we really were getting this kind of movement, and that. So I guess a big point of this is to move these ways is maybe to get a little flicker of the worldview of a microbe. And so maybe you could speak about that a little bit with the dancers, or did people talk about this moving, what it felt like to be able to move from different parts of the body, or did that come up more when they were moving together?
I think that came up more than when we were moving together, but I think it was sort of this idea of reaching outside of where your body ends, where it actually ends, where your limitations are, and really surpassing the idea of that, and being able to think about your own self extending into space, and then that is what brings you through space. So it was just kind of a new way of, instead of like, okay, my pelvis is propelling me through space, it was this other thing that was going first.
And you would expand, in this
Yeah.
sense. So you have like a sort of, that Da Vinci, sort of thing really becomes completely active, or even wider.
Even
than it
larger.
is,
I think it became larger. So yeah, we were not limited to, that kind of space, but we felt ourselves extend beyond it.
So another kind of motility that we were really excited about is called gliding. And one reason we're excited about it is because scientists really aren't very clear about how it happens. So it's still an area fairly ripe for speculation. And so, they know a couple of things about it. I don't know if I want to go into the technicalities. I mean, it's like it has to do with slime, and either emitting slime and having that act as a kind of propulsion, or using it. I mean, it's pretty interesting. Or they have these proteins actually that spiral around their bodies, emitting that adhesive, so that they're sort of acting like screws moving along surfaces. But in other ways, it's completely mysterious. So that left a lot of room for the dancers to try things out. So
the assignment was to move in a way that sort of magically puts you going through space, where you don't necessarily know what's the impetus of the movement. So the floor just ended up being our comfort zone for trying the gliding motility, and we came up with a number of various ways to do this. This is just one of them. And then we did a version where we were all together, basically touching, and we tried to move as a group or kind of a unit and stay together, but no one was leading and no one was following, but we all were moving together.
Which is very microbial thing to do. So those pili that we talked to you about, they also use that to connect to each other, and so or to sense each other, so that you never have one microbe hanging out. They're generally in clusters, and so they move together in this way, and they're communicating by exchanging chemicals. So we wanted to sort of find a way for the dancers to communicate similarly, without sound, without vision, etc. Sometimes we did it blindfolded. So that they could just learn to follow each other, and felt what that felt like.
Yeah, and one of the comments that we got from asking dancers what their experience was experience of sharing resources and energy when gliding together like this in the group. It's less about direction or trying to get somewhere, but more about sensing another body, allowing that body to do the work with me. And we have hats and hoods on because it just, our heads tend to stick to the floor, our hair gets stuck in cotton. So we had our gliding costumes that we had to put on.
So this is another kind of gliding. There's many different kinds. I'll just show you a couple. And these are mostly videos from Howard Berg, he's sort of the godfather of microbial motility videos, the sort of microbial movement porn. It's hard to get your hands on, and I got to meet him actually last week at Harvard, a couple weeks ago at Harvard, and he's in his 80s. He's really wonderful. So anyway, these are Florium Johnson, and they can. This is something they don't really know how these guys are doing this. So
it's like a flipping end to end, and then keeping on the same trajectory, and they kind of stick and flip.
And then sometimes slide along.
Yeah.
It's pretty.
There's just a number of things that they.
Pretty anarchic. It's pretty cool. So here's one of our dancers just kind of experimenting. So for the dancers, it was fun because we would talk a lot about the science with them and show them videos of these guys moving. And we would have often some beginning ideas of things things they might try, but also they did a lot of inventing with us of ways to get into the body or the frame of mind of a microbe. Do you want to talk about?
No, go ahead.
So this is another a method of movement, run and tumble. It's often referred to. It's a way of swimming, and so typically done in fluids. And this was, I think, the most challenging for us to figure out, weirdly, because in fact, oh, well, I'll just keep hitting play maybe. Hold on, come back. I thought it was a longer loop. But microbes move at a speed 3 times faster than a cheetah relative to their body. So they're going 65 body lengths a second. Cheetahs go, 25, which is mind-boggling, right? So we couldn't do that in the studio. So we were trying to, like, scratching our heads, Flora and I, trying to think, like, how do we get the essence of this? So they run like, mad things. And then when they stop on the dime of a hydrogen atom because the water offers so much resistance. And so they stop, we would explode if that happened, but their surface is permeable. So they stop, no big deal. And they get bounced around by the Brownian motion of the water molecules, and that provides a really useful, efficient, random turning mechanism. So it's a great way for searching an area for food. So they stop, and they just head off. However, if they smell something, I'll call it smelling, but they sense chemically something, because a lot of their sensing is happening chemically, then what they'll do is they'll increase the length of their run when they're facing that direction. If the next random stop has them facing the wrong way, they'll go shorter, then longer again, shorter or longer to head where they want. If there's no taxis, no attraction, they'll just wander around till they find something attractive. So here's one of our first tries at this, just trying to figure out how.
Yeah, so it was kind of like, okay, so how do you go really, really fast, stop really suddenly, and then be like thrown around by the water molecules around you, like in a just very randomized way, and then go again in whatever direction you're facing. So, and this sort of speaks to our process too. Like, we would go with the scientific fact and be like, this is what it is. Let's try it this way in a movement exercise. And then either it would just look horrible, or it would feel horrible, or it would somehow like move its way away from the fact or the skill that we were working on, like the real scientific basis for it. So then we would have to sort of remind people of the basis again, and then try and just sort of keep making sure we're clarifying as to what the microbes actually do. Here we're doing this through space, and
so here's taxis. They found food.
Food is at the orange flowers, so the runs away from the food are going to be shorter, and then when you're actually facing the food, when you're facing the food, you want to run as much as possible.
Stay nearby. And then eventually that food becomes toxic and they run off the other way. So this wasn't actually an announced performance. We were just trying things out in space, so we don't have an audience, but it was a good way to test stuff out. So this is then from that performance that I mentioned to you on Memorial Day weekend. So the dancers had already done that kind of run and tumbling that you saw. They'd done that on the beach, and you're quite far away, so they really looked like microbes, and you could hardly pick them out from the crowd. But eventually, as they come across here, they take on a form of movement that makes them a little more noticeable. So this is this peely. They're using the peely technique, but they're moving as clusters. And this happens in the microbial world. You'll have a few of them together, but they move as if there's one peely or two for the whole group. So the dancers really had to tune into each other's bodies.
Yeah, that was another time where we had to just really wait and know when someone was reaching this peely that we may or may not see, and then really allow the whole group to be dragged along with that particular microbe's retraction. So it took listening and just following the group and sort of being off balance quite often and allowing that to happen. Microbes also love surfaces, so it really does make sense that we're sort of moving along the surface of this bridge.
No matter what surface presents itself. In this case, a human is inserted herself or himself, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
In the mix.
Yeah.
Which is sort of something like that happened. I mean, say with that run and tumble thing, we would notice, like we did that on the busier sidewalk in Santa Monica or in various locations, and people would start to join in. Because the run and tumble is pretty easy to pick up on. So there's something, I don't know, what do you want? Is it natural? Is it appealing? Is it whatever it is, but that people will start doing it? And
adults and kids too. I mean, it makes more sense for kids to do it, and they do love to try things on, but even adults would really just sort of automatically, I think without thinking, just, mimic the bodies that they're seeing.
So then, right, okay. And so then this is, you want to talk about trail?
Yeah, so in sort of colonies, the microbes can sort of make these slime trails in spaces. So it becomes kind of like little superhighways of literally slime that they can move easier and more quickly on. And when microbes might meet another microbe, so they can like make their own way, and then they might like hit a trail and they'll go faster. And if they come across like another microbe, they might snap in and travel with the microbe. And then they become bigger groups. So you'll see the different sizes, and like those big blobs are just a number of microbes that have grouped together, and they're now like going along a trail.
You can see the individuals out there generally go slower. You know, when they're carving a trail out for the first time, it's usually slower. Not always, but then once they get on those trails, they speed up. And if we sit here for a minute, I think we'll see, yeah, here we go. So this is after, like, the path is really carved. It's, you know, it's whatever, not rush hour. It's 2 a.m. in the morning, and you can really, like, so we did a little of that here. So we sort of declared a superhighway in the center where so whenever anybody's on that, they speed up. So they, you know, the dancers in all these situations, but here's an example, really have to tune into the environment, and in the way a kind of unseen aspect of the environment. I mean, the center is up to anybody as to where that is, but also tune into each other. You'll see they cluster together sometimes. They don't know quite when that's going to happen or what speed they're going to go. But they have to tune into each other's bodies in a different way than they normally do in dance, or certainly than most of us do walking around. So, I don't know if people...
I think we're at about 25
Oh,
minutes.
good, perfect, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, so here's, I just want to flash some of the, also a big, I have to say big thank you to the SETI Artist in Residence program, without whom never would have gotten to do any of this. So these are many of the scientists who worked with us. And this is on my website. Eventually we'll have a site, we're almost there, called Intelligence Moves, where you can see all the folks who are involved, and these are the dancers. And here's our info. So,